Chapter 1. You wake up slowly with the cold of dawn in a simple room of wood and straw, listening to the distant and rhythmic tolling of the bells announcing the eve of the Epiphany. You wake up slowly, emerging from the depths of sleep like someone rising from the bottom of a calm lake toward the surface. The air in the room is fresh, charged with that clean and sharp cold typical of dawn in the middle of winter. But under the heavy blankets of wool and furs, your body retains a pleasant warmth, a personal refuge against the frosty morning. Open your eyes, and the first thing you see are the dark wooden beams crossing the ceiling, old and familiar, holding the weight of the straw and the snow covering the roof. The light filtering through the small window is a pale gray, almost bluish, announcing that the sun is only just beginning to hint at the horizon. There is no rush at all. In this moment, the world is calm. In the distance, gently breaking the silence of the countryside, you hear the rhythmic and deep sound of the bells. It is a constant tolling, deep, traveling through the morning mist from the church of the neighboring village. Those bells have a specific message today. They do not simply mark the hour, but announce the eve of the Epiphany. It is the day of the manifestation, the end of the 12 days of Christmas, a day wrapped in mystery and ancient holiness. You sit up slowly, feeling the creak of the straw in your mattress, and place your feet on the wooden floor. The cold runs across your skin, awakening your senses, anchoring you in the present. While you dress in thick and simple clothes, your mind travels toward the meaning of this day. In this era, in this medieval world you inhabit, the arrival of the kings is not a simple festivity, but a cosmic event. You walk toward the window and observe the snowy landscape. You think of them, of those figures traveling from the east. For you and for everyone you know, they are not just monarchs with golden crowns. They are, above all, wise astrologers, men of ancient science and unwavering faith who know how to read the secret language written in the celestial vault. They represent the totality of the known world, Europe, Asia, and Africa, united in a single journey under the guidance of a star. Upon going down to the main room, where the stone hearth dominates the space, you prepare to rekindle the fire. You move the logs, uncovering the red embers that have survived the night, and add new wood. The flames begin to lick the bark, and soon the crackling of the fire accompanies the distant sound of the bells. You sit for a moment before the growing warmth, reflecting on the 3 ages of man that those kings symbolize: impetuous youth, consolidated maturity, and old age full of wisdom. It is a complete cycle, a representation of life itself that arrives at your door every year. Their gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, are not mere material treasures in your thoughts. They are amulets, symbols of spiritual protection and divine recognition. You stand up to begin the rituals of the day. Upon the sturdy wooden table rest the ingredients for the special Epiphany bread. It is a dense and aromatic dough that you will prepare with patience. While your hands work the flour, you remember the tradition of the hidden bean. Whoever finds the small legume in their piece of cake will be named the Bean King for a day, a small game of chance and destiny that brings laughter and fortune to the humble house. The aroma of spices begins to fill the room. Clove, cinnamon, and a touch of ginger mix in the air, evoking the distant lands from which the Magi come. You pour a little spiced wine into a clay cup. The steam rises toward your face, warm and comforting. You take a small sip, letting the strong and sweet flavor warm you from within, preparing you for the gentle fast and the prayers that will mark the hours of light. You walk toward the entrance door, the heavy oak leaf that separates your home from the vast outside world. In your hand, you carry a piece of blessed chalk. It is a solemn moment. With slow and deliberate movements, you trace upon the wooden lintel the sacred marks of this year. You write the numbers of the year, and between them the initials of the 3 names that tradition has bestowed upon the travelers, C, M, and B, Caspar, Melchior, Balthazar. Although you also know that those letters contain a petition in Latin, Christus mansionem benedicat, may Christ bless this house. Upon finishing, you observe the white inscription on the dark wood. It is a seal, an invisible barrier against evil spirits, an invitation for the blessing to enter and for evil to pass by. You sprinkle the threshold with a few drops of holy water that you keep in a small ceramic bowl, completing the rite of protection. The day advances with a deliberate slowness. The sunlight, weak but constant, moves across the floorboards. You dedicate yourself to simple tasks, repairing tools, cleaning, always with your mind set on the approaching night. It is said that the Epiphany is a night of omens, where the veil between the divine and the earthly becomes as thin as silk. When the sun begins to descend, tinting the sky with shades of violet and orange, you sit by the fire again. It is the time for stories. Whether you are alone or accompanied, the stories resonate in the memory. You remember the tales the elders told in low voices, stories of stars that move with their own will, guiding the lost. You imagine the Magi not as static figures from an altarpiece, but eternal wanderers. It is said they still roam the roads of the world, visiting humble houses, checking if faith and goodness still reside in the hearts of men. They do not seek palaces, but places where the hearth fire is kept burning with love and patience. You look toward the corner where your dog rests, sleeping peacefully. An ancient medieval belief comes to your mind. Tonight, at exact midnight, the animals will have the gift of speech. It is a brief and secret miracle. It is said that the ox and the mule, witnesses to the divine birth, were the first to receive this honor, and that every year, for an instant, all beasts recover that voice. You will not try to listen to them. You know it is a mystery that must not be disturbed by human curiosity. It is enough to know that the miracle occurs, that nature itself celebrates in silence the arrival of the light. Night finished falling. The wind blows softly outside, whistling at the corners of the house, but inside everything is warmth and safety. The fire crackles, consuming a thick log that will burn for hours. You stay watching the dancing flames, hypnotized by their constant and relaxing movement. You feel part of something much larger than yourself. You are a link in a chain of generations that have waited for this night, who have marked their doors with chalk and have looked to the sky seeking a special star. The feeling is one of deep peace, a tranquility that settles in your bones and quiets your mind. Everything is ready. The house is marked and protected. The bread is baked. The spiced wine has warmed the spirit. Now only waiting remains in this sacred and ancient silence.
while the wheel of time turns slowly toward midnight, bringing with it the magic of the Epiphany to your humble dwelling of wood and straw.
Chapter 2. You walk toward the stone church of the village, where the candlelight flickers over ancient frescoes narrating the arrival of 3 mysterious figures from distant lands. Here is part 2 of the story, written following your instructions for style and content. You adjust the thick wool cloak over your shoulders and cross the threshold of your home, leaving behind the safe warmth of the fireplace to step into the freshness of the night. The air is crisp and cold, a balm that awakens your senses without startling them, while your leather boots crunch softly on the ground hardened by the winter frost. The path toward the stone church of the village is a trail your feet know by heart, a route traced by generations of faithful who, like you, have sought refuge and meaning under the celestial vault. Looking up, you observe the firmament spread over the dark roofs of the neighboring houses, an infinite tapestry of distant diamonds that seem to observe the world with eternal patience. You think of those ancient sages, the astrologers of the East, who spent their nights scrutinizing these same constellations in search of a sign, a subtle change in the cosmic order that would announce the beginning of a new era. As you approach the massive structure of the church, you notice how the warm light of hundreds of candles filters through the narrow windows, spilling pools of amber onto the snow and the gray stone. You push the heavy oak door, which gives way with a deep and familiar groan, and you immerse yourself in the dense and sacred atmosphere of the interior. The aroma is unmistakable, an ancient blend of melted beeswax, stale incense accumulated for centuries in the crevices of the walls, and the damp cold that emanates from the foundations of the earth itself. You walk slowly down the central nave, your footsteps muffled by the solemnity of the place, until you stop in front of the side frescoes that adorn the north wall. The candlelight, flickering and alive, makes the painted figures seem to move slightly, breathing in the gloom. Your eyes rest upon the representation of the 3 travelers. You know, because that is how the elders by the fire told it to you, that they were not simple earthly monarchs concerned with borders and tributes. They were magi, masters of reading the stars, scholars who understood the secret language of the night sky. In the fresco, their robes are painted with pigments that, although faded by time, still suggest the richness of distant and mysterious lands. You observe the first of them, a figure representing youth. His face is clean-shaven, his posture is upright and full of vigor, and his gaze is fixed with intensity on the star painted with gold leaf upon the plaster. He embodies the beginning of life, the strength of the morning, and carries his offering with the determination of one who has all the time in the world ahead. Beside him, the second traveler shows full maturity. A thick beard frames his serene face, and his broad shoulders support a heavy cloak. He represents the age of man at his peak, stability and consolidated strength, just as Europe sees itself at the center of the known world. Finally, the third sage leans slightly, resting on a staff. His hair and beard are white as virgin wool, and his dark skin evokes the heat of Africa or the depths of unknown lands. He is old age, the wisdom accumulated after a long journey, the final understanding that all earthly power must kneel before the divine. Together, these 3 figures do not only bring gifts, they bring with them the totality of the human experience and the representation of all corners of the world, Europe, Asia, and Africa, united in a single pilgrimage. You follow the trail of their painted hands, which hold chests and vases. You reflect on the gifts they carry, objects that are much more than material treasures. Gold, heavy and bright, recognizes supreme royalty, a tribute from king to king. Frankincense, whose smoke you see rising right now in the actual church, is the aroma of divinity, the ethereal connection between the ground you tread upon and the heaven you long for. And myrrh, that bitter and fragrant resin used for anointing, is a silent and somber reminder of humanity, of mortality, and of the sacrifice that awaits at the end of the road. You remain there, standing in the gloom, letting these images settle in your mind. You remember the stories told in low voices when the wind howls outside, that these kings are eternal wanderers, that their journey never truly ends. It is said that, on nights like this, they still travel the forgotten roads, visiting the homes of the humble, to see if faith still lives in simple hearts. Your gaze descends to the lower part of the fresco, where an ox and a mule observe the scene. An imperceptible smile forms on your face as you recall the popular belief that, at the magical hour of midnight, these animals are granted the gift of speech. You wonder what they would say if they could break their millennial silence. Perhaps they would speak of the peace felt when being near the sacred, or perhaps they would simply comment on the cold of the night and the warmth of the straw. You look toward the holy water font near the entrance. You know that this water, blessed especially on this eve, possesses unique protective properties. Later, you will take some to your home, along with the blessed chalk, to renew the marks above your door, closing the circle of protection against the evil spirits that flee from the light of the Epiphany. The thought takes you back to the warmth of your kitchen, to the promise of the traditions that await you upon your return. You imagine the taste of the special Epiphany bread, that sweet and dense dough you have seen prepared since your childhood. You think of the round, golden cake and the dried bean hidden inside, waiting to designate the king of the feast for a day, an innocent game that unites the family in laughter and celebration. But that moment of celebration will come later. Now, the gentle fast you have kept during the day sharpens your mind and clears your spirit. You do not feel hunger, but a kind of lightness, a readiness to receive not only nourishment for the body, but also for the soul. You settle into one of the wooden pews polished by centuries of use. The wood is cold to the touch, but it soon warms under your hand. Around you, other villagers enter silently, shaking snow from their cloaks, their breaths forming ephemeral clouds in the still air. No one speaks. There is no need for words. Everyone shares the same knowledge, the same patient waiting under the gaze of the ancient frescoes. Here, surrounded by the images of the three sages and under the protection of rituals that are older than the stones themselves, you feel part of something immense and enduring. The star painted on the wall seems to shine more intensely as your eyes adjust to the darkness, guiding you toward a state of deep contemplation. You close your eyes for a moment, inhaling the scent of wax and thyme. You listen to the silence. It is not an emptiness, but a presence. It is the calm before the miracle.
The stillness necessary so that the voice of the divine may be heard. You are exactly where you should be, in the center of the sacred night, waiting, like the Magi in the fresco, for the revelation that comes with the light.
Chapter 3. You contemplate the gray winter sky.
imagining how medieval men viewed the kings not only as saints, but as powerful astrologers capable of reading the divine will in the movement of the stars. You leave the central nave of the church, but you do not yet abandon the sacred precinct. You stop under the stone portico, where the freezing night air brushes your face, awakening your senses dulled by the incense. From here, you look up toward the firmament, which stretches over the village like a heavy, dark velvet mantle. Although the winter clouds hide most of the stars, your imagination, fed by ancient stories, is able to see beyond the grayish mist. Men and women of that time united in a single pilgrimage under the light of a star. You breathe deeply the cold air, and in your exhalation you visualize the chests they carry.
They're not random gifts. In the stillness of the night, you reflect on the gold, the incorruptible metal, an offering for a king, recognizing power and sovereignty. You think of the incense, whose smoke always ascends, connecting earth with heaven, an offering for a god, recognizing divinity. And you feel a pang of solemn melancholy, thinking of the myrrh, the bitter resin used for embalming, an offering for a man, recognizing mortality and future sacrifice. These gifts, in popular belief, were not only theological symbols, but objects charged with protective power. It was believed that everything the kings touched became imbued with a holiness capable of warding off evil. This idea of protection leads you to remember domestic rituals, those small liturgies that occurred far from the altar. In the warmth of peasant homes, you imagine yourself back in an old house with thick stone walls and a large central fireplace. You visualize the hand of a father or a grandfather holding a piece of blessed chalk. You hear the scratchy sound of the chalk against the old wood of the main door. They write the initials of the three kings, interspersed with the year and crosses. 20 plus C plus M plus B plus 24. Christus mansionem benedicat. May Christ bless this house. You feel a sense of security, imagining that white inscription upon the dark wood. It was an invisible barrier, a sacred seal that prevented the passage of evil spirits, storms, and misfortune throughout the coming year. Epiphany was not just a feast, it was the night when the protection of the home was renewed. Your thought wanders now toward the water. You remember the tradition of the Epiphany holy water, considered the most potent of the liturgical year. You imagine the villagers carrying jugs and bottles to the church, filling them with the sacred liquid to later sprinkle their fields, their barns, and the beds of the sick. The water, clear and cold, became a vehicle of grace, cleansing not only the body, but the very atmosphere of the house. And while the wind whispers through the bare trees of the nearby cemetery, you remember the most wonderful legends, those told in low voices beside the crackling fire. It was said that this night is a night of hidden miracles. You imagine yourself entering a stable at midnight, where the heat of the animals contrasts with the frost outside. Legend has it that, for a brief instant, in honor of those animals that warmed the manger, the beasts acquire the gift of speech. You imagine the ox and the mule conversing with human voices, revealing prophecies or praising the mystery of the night. But you also remember the warning: no human must attempt to overhear that conversation, for it is a secret reserved for innocent nature. The night of the kings was also a night of omens. Young women dreamed of their future husbands, and the elderly observed the direction of the smoke to guess what the harvests would be like. The whole world seemed to hold its breath, charged with an ancient and reverent magic. You feel the comfort of these stories. They wrap around you like a thick wool blanket. They make you feel part of an unbroken chain of human beings who, year after year, have sought light in the darkness of winter. You think now of the return home, of the set table. You imagine the taste of the special Epiphany bread, the golden cake, round like the sun that is expected to return. You visualize the moment of cutting the roscon, the contained excitement of finding the hidden bean or the small figure of the king. The one who finds the bean becomes the king of the bean for a day, a monarch of jests and laughter in the microcosm of the family. It is a moment of simple joy where the social order is briefly inverted and luck decides who rules the table. You can almost smell the aroma of spiced wine, hot and sweet, with notes of cinnamon, clove, and orange filling the kitchen. It is the scent of hospitality, the scent that combats the January cold and comforts the spirit. All of this, the astrology, the symbols, the chalk on the door, the talking animals, the shared bread, forms a dense and rich fabric of meaning. You are not simply waiting for a date on the calendar. You are inhabiting a sacred time, a time outside of time. You stay a few moments longer under the portico, letting the peace of these reflections settle in the depths of your soul. There is no rush. The night is long and benevolent. The kings, those eternal wanderers, continue their route in your imagination, crossing deserts and mountains, guided by an unshakable faith in the light that shines above. You feel that you too are a pilgrim on this night. Your mind is clear, your heart calm. The story of the Magi has reminded you that the search for truth and beauty is the noblest journey one can undertake. With a slow and satisfied sigh, you prepare to leave the threshold of the church and continue your way, carrying with you the certainty that the world is full of signs for those who know how to look with patience and humility. The night embraces you, and you let yourself be carried by its slow and ancestral rhythm. Chapter 4. You reflect on the immensity of the journey from the east, visualizing slow caravans crossing infinite deserts and ancient maps where the edges of the world blur into the mist. You pause a moment longer under the stone arch of the entrance, allowing the night cold to brush your cheeks, a sharp contrast to the residual warmth you still retain from the candles inside. From this threshold, your gaze is lost in the darkness of the horizon, beyond the silhouetted rooftops of the village, toward the east. Your mind, already serene from the previous meditation, begins to travel. You gently detach yourself from the present to float backward toward a geographical and temporal immensity that unfolds like an ancient map upon a sturdy wooden table. You think of the distance. It is not a distance measured in hours or kilometers, but in the patience of steps and in the slow turning of the seasons. You visualize now, with an almost dreamlike clarity, the origin of that legendary journey. You see slow caravans, very slow, that seem suspended in time, crossing deserts that have no end. You can hear, if you pay attention to the silence of the night, the rhythmic and muffled sound of the camel's footsteps on the cold sand under the starlight. It is a hypnotic sound, constant, the heartbeat of a journey that defies the logic of modern maps. You imagine those travelers not simply as kings with golden crowns, but as something deeper and more mysterious, wise astrologers, magi in the ancient sense of the word, men who have dedicated their lives to reading the luminous calligraphy of the firmament. You see them wrapped in heavy garments, layers of wool and silk that protect them from the biting wind of the open plains. In your vision, they are the whole world. You remember the old illustrations from illuminated manuscripts where these three men were not just individuals, but living representations of the known earth. One represents Europe, another Asia, another Africa. Together, they are complete humanity walking toward the same point of light. You observe their faces by the light of torches carried by their servants. You see the three ages of man reflected in them, an allegory that medieval thinkers loved to contemplate. You see youth in one, with an impatient gaze and strength intact, carrying the incense that connects earth with heaven. You see maturity in the second, with a full beard and the firm posture of one who governs his own destiny, holding the gold, the metal that does not corrupt, a symbol of royalty and solar light. And you see old age in the third, with skin weathered by 1,000 suns and wisdom in tired but bright eyes, carrying the myrrh, the balm of preservation and mortal humanity, the reminder that every journey has an end and a purpose. You imagine unfolding one of those ancient maps, with irregular edges and parchment color, where the limits of the known world blur into a pale mist. On those maps, beyond the trade routes, cartographers wrote hic sunt dracones, or drew fantastic creatures, because the unknown was vast and fearsome. But these wise men advance toward that mist, guided solely by a star. That star is not for you in this moment of contemplation a simple celestial body, but a real divine sign, just as the medieval mind understood it. It is a spark of intelligence in the chaos of the universe, a lamp lit by an invisible hand to mark the change of an era. You feel the absolute confidence of these wanderers. They do not need magnetic compasses or detailed maps, because their guide is above, bright and fixed in its purpose. Your mind descends now from the dunes and ancient maps to enter a warmer and closer room. You transport yourself to the interior of a medieval house on this same night of Epiphany, centuries ago. You feel the heat of a great wood fire crackling in the fireplace, illuminating a room of stone walls and wooden beams darkened by the smoke of years. It is a refuge against the winter, a sacred space of domesticity. You observe a family gathered, their faces glowing with the reflection of the flames. For them, this night is charged with omens and wonders. It is not just any night. It is the night when the veil between the divine and the earthly is thinnest. You smell the aroma of the special Epiphany bread being broken on the table. It is a golden cake, round like the sun or like a crown. And you know that within its tender and sweet dough, a secret is hidden, a dried bean or a silver coin. You imagine the quiet anticipation of the children and the elderly, waiting to see who will be the Bean King for a day, a small game of chance that connects the playful with the sacred. On the table, there are also steaming clay jugs. It is spiced wine, hot and comforting. You can almost taste the blend of cinnamon, clove, honey, and ginger, an intense flavor that warms the chest and gladdens the spirit, designed to combat the cold that seeps through the cracks in the doors. You listen to the stories being told in low voices by the fire. The grandparents narrate tales of the kings as eternal wanderers, figures who never stop traveling and who, on nights like this, might knock on the door of any humble house to ask for lodging or leave a blessing. They speak of stars that move and descend until they touch the treetops. They speak of the belief, whispered with respect, that at exactly midnight, the animals in the stables briefly acquire the gift of speech to praise the miracle, although they warn that no human should try to listen to them, for the mystery must remain hidden. You see the father of the family rise with solemnity. In his hand he carries a piece of chalk, a chalk that has been blessed at the morning mass. You follow him with your gaze as he heads to the main door, that thick oak wood reinforced with iron. With slow and deliberate movements, he writes an ancient formula on the lintel, a mixture of numbers and letters, the current year, and the initials of the three wise men, C, M, and B, interspersed with crosses. Caspar, Melchior, Balthazar. But also, Christus mansionem benedicat, may Christ bless this dwelling. It is an act of protection, a visible seal against evil spirits, against storms, and against the darkness outside. You feel the peace that this ritual instills in the house. It is the certainty of being guarded, that the wisdom of the travelers from the East has become a shield for the home. You also see the small bowl of holy water near the entrance, and how the mother sprinkles a few drops in the corners of the rooms, on the beds, in the stables, spreading an invisible mantle of security over everything that possesses life. Everything is slow. Everything has a meaning. The gentle fasts of the previous days have sharpened the senses, making the taste of the sweet bread and spiced wine more intense, more rewarding. Prayer is not a tedious obligation, but a natural rhythm, like breathing, that accompanies the vigil. You immerse yourself in that atmosphere of suspended time. You feel that you too are sitting by that medieval fire, protected by the chalk on the door and faith in the star. The immensity of the Magi's journey, crossing deserts and mountains, is now condensed into the intimacy of this home, into the security of these four walls. You understand that Epiphany, for the ancient mind, was not just a historical event that happened once in Judea, but a cyclical reality that returns every year to renew the world. The kings continue to travel. The star continues to shine for those who know how to look up, and the protection of the sacred night remains in effect. Little by little, the image of the caravan, of the blurred maps and the medieval fireplace fades away, but without abruptness, like the smoke of a candle that slowly goes out. You find yourself again under the portico, in the present night. But something has changed. The darkness no longer seems empty or hostile. It is populated by the memory of centuries of pilgrims, of families who marked their doors with chalk, of wise men who looked at the sky seeking answers. You feel a deep connection, an invisible thread that joins your breath with that of those who traveled before you. The cold of the night now seems cleaner to you, purer. Filled with that ancient calm, you adjust your coat, feeling the comforting weight of history on your shoulders, and you prepare to take the next step on your own path, knowing that somehow you too are following a star. Chapter 5. You observe a painting on the altar where the kings represent the three ages of man: youth, maturity, and old age, reminding you of the natural and tranquil cycle of human life. Your steps, muffled by the solemnity of the ancient stone, stop in front of a side altar, barely lit by the flickering of a few votive candles that struggle gently against the gloom. In front of you, framed in dark wood carved with motifs of vines and acanthus leaves, rests an oil painting, darkened by the passage of centuries and the incense smoke of countless forgotten masses. You approach slowly, allowing your eyes to adjust to the dim light, and you notice how the surface of the canvas presents that network of fine cracks, the craquelure that gives the image the texture of ancient and venerable skin. It is a representation of the adoration of the Magi. But observing it closely, with that calm that now floods your chest, you understand that the medieval artist did not just paint a biblical event, but a mirror of human existence itself. Your gaze rests first on the figure on the left, the youngest king, the one who stands with a barely contained energy, dressed in brightly colored robes that, though dulled by time, suggest a hopeful green and a vibrant red. This king has no beard, his face is smooth, clean, and his eyes shine with the insatiable curiosity of youth, looking not toward the ground, but upward, toward the star that has guided them, reminding you that for the medieval man, these were not just monarchs, but wise astrologers, readers of the firmament, who sought divine signs in the immensity of the night. He represents the morning of life, the spring of existence, the moment when the path stretches infinitely toward the horizon and strength seems inexhaustible. You hold your breath for a moment, feeling how that youthful energy captured in the painting resonates in some distant memory of your own past, a time of beginnings and searches, where every star was a promise and every dawn an omen. You slide your gaze toward the center of the composition, where the imposing figure of the second king stands, a man in the prime of his maturity, with a thick, dark beard framing a face of firm and decisive features. His posture is solid, like an oak rooted in the earth, and his clothes, heavy and rich in golden brocades, speak of the weight of responsibility, of power, and of the administration of the earthly world. This king represents the midday of life, the summer of existence, the stage of construction and sustenance, where man, no longer so distracted by distant stars, occupies himself with governing his own destiny and that of those under his care. You observe the chest he offers, filled with gold, the metal that does not corrupt, a symbol of royalty and matter, and you think about how the medieval mindset saw in it not just wealth, but the representation of entire continents, perhaps Europe or Asia, uniting the known geography under a single spiritual purpose. There is a gravity in his gaze that transmits to you security, a feeling that in the cycle of life there is a time for strength and for action, an intermediate time where the world is held upon the shoulders. Finally, your eyes descend toward the kneeling figure, the third king, the old man with hair and beard as white as the snow of an unreachable peak, whose back curves slightly in a gesture of absolute humility. His skin, painted with mastery, shows the furrows of time, the wrinkles that are maps of 1,000 lived experiences, and his gaze no longer seeks the star nor earthly power, but rests with tenderness and recognition on the divine child. He is the evening and the night of life, the necessary and serene winter, the old age that does not lament, but understands, the stage where knowledge has been transformed into wisdom and action into contemplation. In his hands he holds the vessel of myrrh, that aromatic and bitter resin used in funeral and healing rituals, a reminder of human mortality, but also of preservation and of the spiritual nature that transcends the flesh. Contemplating this elderly king, you feel that the painting speaks to you of a reassuring truth, that aging is, in itself, a sacred act, a progressive approach to the truth, a shedding of the superfluous to remain with the essential. The painting, as a whole, breathes a perfect harmony. The three ages of man, youth, maturity, and old age, coexist in the same space, in the same eternal instant, reminding you that all these stages dwell within you, in your memories, in your present, and in your inevitable future. As you observe the details in the background of the painting, your mind wanders toward the beliefs that surrounded these figures in medieval homes, imagining how common people looked at the sky on the eve of Epiphany, searching for that same star as a real and divine sign. You can almost smell the imaginary aroma of the foods that accompanied this holiday, the special Epiphany bread, dense and nourishing, baked with care in wood-fired ovens, and the sweet cakes where a dried bean was hidden. You visualize the families gathered, breaking the cake with silent expectation, knowing that whoever found the bean would be crowned king for a day, a small reversal of the social order that brought joy and play in the midst of the harsh winter. You imagine the taste of the spiced wine, hot and comforting, passing from hand to hand while the fire crackled in the hearth, the only source of light and heat against the darkness outside. You think of the blessed chalk, that humble object yet charged with power, with which the fathers of families marked the lintels of their doors with the initials of the kings and the current year, a sacred formula, Christus mansionem benedicat, intended to protect the house from evil spirits and misfortunes. It was a night of omens, you remember having read or heard, a night where the boundary between the natural and the supernatural became thin and permeable, like the mist that rises at dawn. It was said, in whispers told by the embers, that at the midnight of Epiphany, the animals in the stables acquired the gift of speech, conversing among themselves with human voices to honor the sacred moment, although no human should try to listen to them under penalty of misfortune. You look at the painting again and notice the animals that appeared discreetly in the background, an ox and a mule, painted with large, dark eyes, and you wonder if the artist, while brushing their muzzles, was thinking of that legend of speaking beasts and magical knights. The atmosphere that envelops you in front of the altar feels charged with that same ancient and restful magic. There is no fear, only a deep sense of continuity, of being one more link in a chain of observers who have sought solace in these same images. You think of the holy water collected on this special night, to which unique protective and healing properties were attributed, capable of driving away shadows and purifying the fields for the coming sowing. Everything in the pictorial scene and in your thoughts leads you to a conclusion of peace. Life is a journey, like that of these kings, a constant transit from the east of youth toward the west of old age, guided by lights that we sometimes see clearly and sometimes only intuit. The Magi, for those men and women of the Middle Ages, were not just characters from a sacred book. They were eternal wanderers, protectors of travelers, figures who could still visit humble homes in spirit to leave their blessing. You feel the silence of the church becoming denser, more welcoming, like a heavy blanket covering your shoulders, and you allow yourself to rest in the vision of those three figures, accepting your own place in the cycle, your own age, your own moment on the long road. There is no rush in your contemplation. Time seems to have stopped, trapped in the dry oil and in the motionless flame of the candle, allowing you to breathe in history, drink the calm of the centuries, and feel protected, as if an invisible chalk had also marked the door of your heart on this sacred night.
You stay there, motionless, letting the lesson of the three ages settle within you, soft and nourishing like shared bread, warm like spiced wine, eternal like the star that, painted hundreds of years ago, continues to shine faintly in the darkness of the canvas. You stop to examine the sacred vessels, painted with such realism that you can almost feel the weight of the metals and the texture of the resins. They are not simple decorative objects, they are keys that open the door to an ancient understanding of the world. A medieval vision where matter and spirit were indissolubly united. You focus first on the open chest offered by the youngest king. The gold shines with an inner light, capturing the faint glow of the candles around you. In the medieval mind, this gold was not merely an economic tribute, but the recognition of supreme royalty. You observe how the artist has detailed every link, every engraving in the metal, reminding you that, for those men of antiquity, these travelers were not just monarchs from distant lands, but wise astrologers. They were the custodians of a lost science, men who knew how to read the decrees of the divine in the celestial vault. Contemplating the gold, you think of the vastness that these men represented. For the medieval imagination, they embodied the totality of the known world, Europe,
Asia, and Africa. 3 continents, 3 races, 3 ages of man, all converging at a single point of humility. You feel a strange comfort in thinking of that union. The gold symbolizes authority, but an authority that kneels, that recognizes there is something greater than earthly power. It is a thought that calms any anxiety about status or achievement. Everything, in the end, is an offering. Your gaze slides gently toward the second vessel, a finely crafted silver incense boat from which an imaginary aroma seems to emanate. It is the incense. You imagine the smoke ascending in slow, lazy spirals toward the wooden beams of a high, dark ceiling. The incense is for the god. It is the vertical connection between earth and heaven, prayer made visible. This thought leads you to the mists of medieval beliefs associated with Epiphany. You remember how, on those long January nights, common people sought to protect their homes with the same faith with which the kings offered their incense. You visualize an elderly hand holding a piece of blessed chalk. You hear the soft scratching of the chalk on the rough wood of a door lintel, marking the initials of the 3 legendary names, Caspar, Melchior, Balthazar, enclosed between the digits of the new year. Christus mansionem benedicat. May Christ bless this house. The image envelops you in a sense of absolute security. You feel protected, as if you were inside one of those ancient houses, with the windows closed against the winter wind, knowing that the threshold has been sealed against any evil spirit, against any shadow that is not welcome. The incense purifies the air, and the blessed chalk establishes a sacred boundary that nothing dark can cross. You breathe deeply, and the air in the room seems cleaner, lighter, charged with that secular protection. Finally, your eyes rest on the third vessel, the most mysterious of all. It is an alabaster jar, sealed and solemn. It contains the myrrh. You know that myrrh is a bitter resin used in antiquity for embalming, for preserving bodies. It is the gift for the mortal. You pause on this symbolism with a surprising calm. Far from unsettling you, the myrrh speaks to you of the acceptance of humanity. The God they visit is not just spirit. He is flesh. He is vulnerable. He is mortal, just like you. The myrrh recognizes pain and the end, but it does so with a dignity that transforms it into something sacred. In the Middle Ages, this awareness of death was not morbid, but a constant companion that gave value to life. Your mind travels now toward the warmth of a medieval home, far from the cold exposure of the roads. You imagine the fire crackling in the hearth, casting dancing shadows upon the stone walls. It is the night of Epiphany, and upon the sturdy wooden table rests the special bread, the golden cake, round like the returning sun. You can almost taste the sweet crumb, the aroma of orange blossom water and spices brought from the east. You visualize a family gathered, breaking the bread with anticipation, searching for the bean hidden inside. Whoever finds the bean will be crowned king for a night. A playful reminder that fortune and grace can touch anyone, even the humblest. There is spiced wine, warm and comforting, heating the body after the gentle fasts and the prayers of the vigil. Everything is cyclical, everything is ritual, everything is in order. You let yourself be carried away by the stories told by that fire, whispered tales while the wind howled outside. It was said that the Magi were eternal wanderers, that their journey never truly ended, and that even today, if one pays enough attention, one can hear the jingling of their camels' harnesses in the night breeze. There was talk of stars that moved with a will of their own, guiding not only kings, but any lost soul back home. And then the deepest mystery of the night of Epiphany, the legend of the animals. You remembered the belief that exactly at midnight, in the absolute silence of the stables, the oxen and mules acquired the gift of speech for a brief instant in honor of those who warmed the manger. You imagined yourself standing in a dark stable, smelling clean straw and animal breath, waiting in a reverent silence to hear a word of ancient wisdom spoken by a noble beast. That connection with nature, with the magic hidden in the everyday, fills you with a deep peace. The medieval world evoked by these vessels of gold, frankincense, and myrrh is not a world of darkness, but an enchanted world where every object, every animal, and every star has a meaning and a purpose. You look at the painting again. The three vessels, held by wise hands, form a perfect triangle of meaning: gold for the king, frankincense for God, myrrh for man. You realize that you too carry those three offerings within you. You have your own nobility, your own divine spark, and your own human mortality. Understanding is slow, heavy, and sweet like honey. There is nothing to fear in old age or the passage of time, because everything is part of an immense liturgy that has been celebrated for centuries. You feel part of that unbroken chain of human beings who have sought the light, who have marked their doors with chalk, who have shared bread and who have looked to the sky searching for a sign. The silence of the room becomes denser, more welcoming. The vessels in the painting now seem to guard your own rest. Gold promises you courage, frankincense, spiritual peace, and myrrh, rest for the weary body. You feel cradled by these traditions. Wrapped in the heavy and rich mantle of history, ready to leave behind the worries of the day and immerse yourself in the stillness of the sacred. All is well. The kings watch over, the star guides, and the house is protected. Chapter 7. You participate in the silent ritual of blessing the home, observing how a hand traces with blessed chalk the initials of the kings over the sturdy wooden lintel to ask for protection. The warmth of inner understanding about the gold, frankincense, and myrrh settles in your chest, merging with the actual temperature of the room. You find yourself now sitting near the hearth in a chair of dark wood polished by the use of generations, while the fire crackles with a hypnotic rhythm, almost like a slow and deep breath marking the passage of the night. You are not alone in this vigil, although silence is the primary guest. Around you, the house breathes with the heaviness of ancient stone and old wood, steeped in centuries of smoke and prayers. You look at the flames, and, in their orange and blue dance, you remember who those travelers occupying your thoughts really are. For the medieval mind you now inhabit, the Magi are not simply monarchs from distant lands who come and go. They are sages, astrologers who read the mathematical language of the heavens, men who understand that the stars are God's writing upon the black parchment of the night. You think of their figures, just as the ancients imagined them. They are not just three individuals, they are the representation of the entire known world, Europe, Asia, and Africa, united in a single purpose. And deeper still, they represent the three ages of man, a mirror in which you can see yourself reflected. You see the first in your mind, the young man, impetuous and full of hope, representing youth and the future. You see the second, the mature man, strong and determined, the image of action and the present. And you see the third, the old man with a white beard, who carries wisdom, memory, and the acceptance of the end, representing old age. The three walk together toward the same point, reminding you that all stages of life, from vigor to fragility, are sacred and worthy of presenting themselves before the divine. The aroma in the room changes subtly. You stop perceiving only the wood smoke and now notice a sweet and spicy scent floating in the dense air. Upon a low table near the fire rests the special bread of Epiphany. It is a round cake, golden from the oven, shining under the candlelight. You know that within its tender crumb a bean is hidden. A small vegetable secret that, according to tradition, will turn whoever finds it into king for a day. Beside the bread, there is a jug of coarse ceramic containing spiced wine. The steam emanating from it brings notes of cinnamon, clove, and honey, a warm mixture designed to comfort the body on the coldest nights of winter. It is a gentle fast, a contained celebration, where the pleasure of the senses blends with the solemnity of the spirit. You rise slowly from the chair. The movement is fluid, without urgency. Your steps upon the stone tiles barely make a sound, muffled by the thickness of your wool leggings. It is the moment of the central ritual, the act that will seal the safety of this refuge. You walk toward the main entrance of the house. The door is an imposing structure of solid oak. reinforced with bands of black iron, a physical barrier against the outside world, against the cold and the darkness. But you know that wood and iron are not enough. A protection of another order is needed. In your hand, you feel the dry and powdery texture of a small stick of chalk. It is no ordinary chalk. It was blessed that very morning in the church, sprinkled with holy water, turning it into a tool of spiritual power. It is white, fragile, but charged with the strength of collective faith. You stop in front of the closed door. You can feel, through the small cracks between the planks, the icy breath of the winter night. Outside, the world is a place of mysteries. You remember the stories told in low voices by the fire. It is said that tonight, the night of Epiphany, it is a night of omens. It is told that when the clock strikes midnight, the animals in the stables briefly acquire the gift of speech, conversing with human voices to praise the miracle, although no man must listen to them on pain of misfortune. It is also told that the Magi are eternal wanderers, that their spirits continue to travel the roads of the world each year, visiting not only palaces but humble houses, seeking lodging in the hearts of good people. With these thoughts filling your mind with a quiet wonder, you raise your hand toward the door lintel. The wood is dark, almost black from the passage of time, and offers a perfect contrast for the white chalk. The ritual is silent. There is no need to utter words aloud, for the intention is what carves the message into the ether. You begin to trace the numbers of the year. The chalk dust falls softly, like a tiny snow upon your sleeves and upon the stone floor. You write the first 2 numbers of the millennium. Then, with a firm and deliberate movement, you draw a cross. Then you write the first initial, C. As you draw it, you think of Caspar, but also of the Latin invocation, Christus. You draw another cross, small and precise. You write the second initial, M. You think of Melchior, and simultaneously of the word mansionem, the dwelling, the house. You draw the third cross. The sound of the chalk scratching the rough wood is the only sound in the room, a dry and rhythmic scritch-scratch that is strangely satisfying. You write the third initial, B. You think of Balthazar and complete the sacred phrase, benedicat, bless. Finally, you close the inscription with another cross and the last 2 digits of the current year, 20 plus C plus M plus B plus year. You take a step back to observe your work. The white letters glow faintly in the gloom. Christus mansionem benedicat. May Christ bless this dwelling. It is not just a request, it is an affirmation. By marking the lintel, you have created a sacred threshold. You have invited the 3 wise men to enter, and, with them, you have invited divine protection. You believe, with the absolute certainty of the era, that no evil spirit, no malicious shadow, and no misfortune will be able to cross that line of blessed chalk throughout the coming year. The sense of security that washes over you is physical. It is as if you had thrown an invisible and indestructible bolt. The house is no longer just a building, it is a sanctuary. You stay there for a few more seconds, observing the inscription. The simplicity of the crude letters on the old wood has an austere beauty. You imagine the Star of Bethlehem shining high above, outside, in the immense cold, and you feel that its light somehow connects with that white chalk on your door. You return slowly toward the fire. The air now seems warmer, stiller. The tension of the outside world has completely vanished. You feel cradled by tradition, protected by rituals that have worked for your ancestors and that will work for you. You return to your seat. You take the cup of spiced wine and feel the warmth of the ceramic in your hands. You take a small sip. The flavor is sweet, strong, and ancient. Everything is in order. The kings have passed, the house is marked, and the night, far from being fearsome, has become a protective mantle that envelops your home in a blessed and deep silence. Simply, you are there. You exist in this moment of perfect peace, watching the embers glow, knowing that you are safe. You sit at a long and worn table to share the king's cake, observing the calm expectation of the diners to find the hidden bean that designates the ephemeral monarch of the day. You turn slowly from the threshold of the door, leaving behind the fresh night air and the chalk inscription that now protects your entrance, to step back into the cozy warmth of the main room. The fire in the fireplace has lowered its intensity, transforming into a bed of glowing embers that emit a constant and deep heat, bathing the room in orange tones and soft shadows that dance lazily on the stone walls. You walk without haste toward the center of the room, where a long and sturdy table awaits you, a piece of furniture that has seen countless winters pass, and that bears on its surface the marks and scars of many past dinners, polished by the rubbing of hands and elbows over the decades. You sit on one of the wooden benches, feeling the solidity of the seat under your weight, and rest your forearms on the table, noticing the smooth and worn texture of the wood under your palms, a sensation that connects you with the history of this place and with all those who have sat here before you to celebrate this same night. In front of you, illuminated by the flickering light of beeswax candles, rests the center of tonight's celebration, the king's cake, a round and golden cake baked with care and patience, exhaling a sweet and comforting aroma of leavened dough, honey, and candied fruits. You observe the shiny crust of the cake, perhaps adorned with frosted fruits that shine like jewels under the firelight, sugar rubies and emeralds that promise sweetness and festivity, while the steam from a nearby clay jug brings you the intoxicating smell of spiced wine, hot and fragrant with notes of cinnamon, cloves, and orange peel. There is an absolute calm in the air, a serene expectation that requires no words as you prepare to share this sacred food, aware that it is not simply a dinner, but a rite that unites the earthly with the divine. As you observe the intact cake, your mind travels toward the figures that inspire this vigil, those mysterious travelers from the East who, in the mindset of ancient centuries, were much more than simple monarchs bearing riches. You think of them not only as kings, but as wise astrologers, men of science and spirit who spent their nights scrutinizing the firmament, reading the designs of the eternal in the silent movement of the celestial spheres, capable of interpreting the language of the stars and understanding that a new light announced a change in the history of the world.
You remember the old teachings that say these three men represented the totality of the known world and the fullness of human experience, embodying in their figures the continents of Europe, Asia, and Africa, united in a common purpose, erasing borders in their search for truth. You visualize their faces in the flames of the hearth, impetuous youth full of hope, consolidated and strong maturity, and venerable old age laden with wisdom and patience, the three ages of man gathered in a single journey, reminding you that the search for the secret belongs to every stage of life, from the vigor of the beginning to the reflection of the end. You contemplate the meaning of their gifts, which go beyond material value, gold, which recognizes royalty and power, incense, whose smoke rises toward the sky, recognizing divinity, and myrrh, that bitter and preserving resin which speaks of humanity, of suffering and mortality, but also of healing and protection against corruption. You take the bone-handled knife resting on the table, and with slow and deliberate movements, you prepare to cut the cake. Feeling how the blade pierces the crunchy crust and slides through the tender and spongy crumb, releasing a new wave of aromatic steam. You know that inside this golden dough a small secret is hidden, a dried bean, or perhaps a small figure, a humble object that has the power to transform the destiny of the night, designating by chance, or perhaps by providence, the ephemeral monarch of the day. There is no haste in your movement, nor anxiety to find the prize, only a quiet curiosity and an acceptance of the ritual game, understanding that whoever finds the bean will be symbolically crowned, assuming the role of king or queen for a few hours, presiding over the table with a playful and benevolent authority. You serve the spiced wine in ceramic or pewter cups, watching the dark and steaming liquid fall with a pleasant liquid sound. And you raise your cup in a silent toast toward the window, toward the starry night, and toward the invisible path that the Magi traveled. You take a sip, letting the warmth of the wine spread through your chest, comforting you as you chew the first piece of the cake, savoring the mixture of sweetness and spices, the texture of the fruits and the softness of the bread, a flavor that seems to contain the very essence of the festivity. As you eat, your mind lets itself be carried away by the medieval beliefs associated with this magical night. Stories whispered by the fire by generations of grandparents to grandchildren. Tales that transform Epiphany into a moment of omens and wonders. You think of the star, that real divine sign that guided the wise men, and how in this night it is believed that the sky is more alive than ever, that the stars can move or shine with an unusual intensity for those who know how to look with faith and attention. You remember the legends about the animals of the stable, the ox and the mule, and the popular belief that, upon reaching midnight, they are granted the gift of speech for a brief instant, allowing them to praise the miracle they witnessed or prophesy about the coming year, although you know it is better not to try to listen to their conversations, respecting the mystery of their nature. The atmosphere of the room feels charged with a subtle but protective energy, reinforced by the holy water you may have sprinkled in the corners and the chalk that marks your door, creating a sanctuary where evil spirits have no place and where only light and blessing can enter. You look toward the fire, which is now a deep and calm glow, and you imagine the stories that were told on nights like this, tales of the kings as eternal wanderers who never stopped traveling, blessing the paths and the homes of those who offer them hospitality in their hearts.
Stories of kings who still visit humble houses, not with pomp or noisy entourages, but in the silence of the night, leaving invisible gifts of peace, health, and prosperity to those who have maintained faith and kindness during the year. You cut another piece of the cake, enjoying the company of your own thoughts or the silent presence of your loved ones, observing each bite with relaxed attention, waiting to see if the bean appears, but already feeling rewarded by the simplicity and beauty of this moment. The wind outside may blow or the snow may fall, covering the world in silence, but here, sitting at this worn table, with the taste of spiced wine on your lips and the heat of the fire on your face, you feel part of an uninterrupted chain of celebrations. You feel that you are sharing the table not only with those present, but with the wise men of the East, with the ancestors who baked similar cakes in centuries past, and with the hope that the light they followed also illuminates your home during the year that has just begun. The night advances with a slow pace, and the expectation for the bean remains like a golden thread that unites the moments, a small thrill in the midst of the great calm, while the cake diminishes and the feeling of satiety and gratitude fills the space, preparing you for rest and for the dreams that will come under the protection of the three kings. Chapter 9. You hear whispered stories by the fire about the relics of the kings and their long final rest in Cologne Cathedral, making them the eternal patrons of all travelers. You settle more deeply into your seat, feeling how the wooden backrest welcomes the weight of your tired but satisfied body. In front of you, the fire in the fireplace has ceased to be a lively burst to become a constant glow, a warm and golden presence that illuminates the room with a soft and flickering light. You hold the cup of spiced wine between your hands, feeling the heat of the ceramic transfer through the skin of your palms, a heat that travels slowly to your wrists and spreads through your arms, relaxing every muscle. The sweet and spicy taste of cinnamon and clove still lingers on your palate, a reminder of the celebration, of the shared rite, of the broken cake and the hope of the found bean. You look at the flames, and in their hypnotic dance, you begin to remember the stories that have been told on nights like this for centuries. Stories whispered by grandparents to grandchildren, by travelers in inns, by monks in scriptoriums, illuminated only by tallow candles. Your mind, now calm and stripped of the day's worries, turns toward the central figures of this vigil, the three kings. In the stillness of the medieval night, you understand that they were not simply monarchs from distant lands. They were something deeper, more mysterious. They were the sages, the great astrologers who knew the secret language of the firmament. You imagine these three men not as figures from a clay nativity scene, but as living representations of all humanity. You think about how the Middle Ages saw them. 3 ages of man, 3 stages of life walking together under the same star. You visualize the first, young and full of vigor, with his gaze set on the horizon, representing impetuous youth and hope. Then you see the second, a man in the prime of his maturity, with a thick beard and strong shoulders, carrying the weight of responsibility and power. And finally, the third, an old man with a white beard and a slow but steady step, whose wisdom surpasses any physical strength, representing old age and the culmination of experience. Europe, Asia, and Africa. 3 continents, 3 ages, 3 men united by a single light in the sky.
You take a small sip of wine and let the warm liquid go down your throat, comforting you. You think of their gifts. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They are not simple material gifts in your meditation, but symbols of spiritual protection. Gold for the king, frankincense for divinity, myrrh for mortal humanity. You feel that, by evoking these gifts, an invisible layer of security settles over the house, over the stone walls and the wooden beams that shelter you from the cold outside. The fire crackles softly. A piece of wood settles on the embers, releasing a small rain of sparks that rise through the chimney toward the starry night. Your thought travels now far from this room, crossing mountains and rivers, toward the place where these eternal travelers rest. You remember the legends about their relics, about the long pilgrimage of their sacred bones. From the Far East to Constantinople, then to Milan, and finally, their great journey across the Alps until reaching the city of Cologne. You visualize the great Gothic cathedral, immense and dark against the night sky, rising like a prayer of stone on the banks of the Rhine. There, in the heart of that colossal temple, you imagine the golden reliquary, a masterpiece of goldsmithing that shines even in the twilight of the central nave. It is there where the kings sleep. Legend says that, having been the first and greatest travelers in search of divine light, they became forever the patrons of all who undertake a journey. You feel a deep connection with that idea. You, too, are a traveler in time, a pilgrim in life. The idea that their remains rest in Cologne, protected by centuries of devotion, transmits an immense peace to you. It is said that those who visit their sanctuary, or simply those who invoke them with faith before departing, never walk alone. Their spirits, wise and ancient, know all the roads, all the hidden paths, and guide the steps of those who seek their destiny. The atmosphere in the room becomes dense, charged with an ancient and respectful magic. You think of the popular beliefs that transform this night into a moment outside of time. It is said that in the deepest hour of the night, when the silence is absolute, the barrier between the natural and the divine becomes thin, almost transparent. You remember the stories about the animals in the stables, the ox and the mule who witnessed the arrival of the kings, and who are granted the gift of speech for a few brief moments at midnight. You imagine the nearby stable where the animals rest on fresh straw. You do not feel fear, but a quiet reverence. You know that no one should try to listen to those sacred conversations. It is a mystery that belongs only to them and to the night. It is enough to know that the miracle occurs, that nature itself recognizes the sanctity of the moment. Your eyes scan the room and stop at the entrance door, the one you marked earlier with the blessed chalk. Those letters and numbers, crudely drawn on the dark wood, are more than a simple ritual. They are an invitation and a shield. You remember the tales of old women by the fire, stories that say the three kings are eternal wanderers who continue their journey every year, passing invisibly through villages and cities. It is told that, if the door is marked and the heart of the inhabitants is pure, the kings stop for a moment on the threshold. They do not enter physically, but their blessing passes through the wood and stone. They leave behind a trail of peace, driving away evil spirits and the shadows that lurk in winter. The chalk is the beacon that indicates to them that in this house they are remembered, that here there is a refuge for their memory.
You look at the rest of the king's cake on the table. The sweet bread, with its circular shape, reminds you of a crown, but also of the cycle of the year that begins and ends. The bean hidden inside is not just a game, it is a seed of prosperity, a small omen of good fortune for whoever finds it. Everything on the table, from the breadcrumbs to the aroma of wine, is imbued with meaning. Even the gentle fast that preceded this dinner feels now like a necessary preparation, an emptying of oneself to be able to fill up with this tranquility. The fire has gone down a bit more, and the shadows in the corners of the room lengthen, soft and protective. There is nothing to fear in the darkness of this night. The star that guided the Magi shines, invisible but present, over your own roof. You think of the water from the wells and the streams, which according to legend becomes as sacred as wine at this hour, acquiring healing and protective properties. The entire outside world, cold and frozen, is vibrating with a silent and benevolent energy. You feel heavy, but it is a pleasant weight, the weight of security and belonging to a tradition that stretches back for thousands of years. You are part of history. You are the traveler resting by the fire, protected by the kings who sleep in Cologne, guided by the stars that the astrologers read so long ago. You hear the soft wind brush against the windows, but inside there is only calm. The story of the kings is not just a tale from the past, it is a present reality in the warmth of your home. Their figures, majestic and serene, seem to watch over your rest from the dancing shadows. You allow yourself to close your eyes for a moment, breathing deeply the warm air, feeling immensely grateful for this refuge, for this moment of pause, for the certainty that while the star shines, you will never truly be lost. Chapter 10. Presences. A simple representation in the atrium where neighbors disguised in heavy robes solemnly recreate the encounter with Herod and the warning of the angel. You leave behind the direct heat of the fireplace, although you carry with you the warmth of the spiced wine that still comforts your chest. You stand up with slow movements, without any hurry, allowing the atmosphere of the night to envelop you completely. You walk toward the atrium, that intermediate space between the refuge of your home and the outside world, where the air is a bit cooler and smells of ancient stone and melted wax. There, under the dim light of the candles flickering softly against the walls, you find your neighbors gathered. There are no loud noises or clamor, only a respectful murmur, a shared reverence for the moment they are about to recreate. You observe that some of them wear heavy robes, thick wool fabrics, and worn velvet cloaks that fall with gravity to the flagstone floor. They have transformed, ceasing to be the everyday acquaintances to become timeless figures, echoes of a story that has been told for centuries. You settle into a corner, wrapped in your own blanket, and prepare to witness this simple representation, almost static, taking place in the center of the atrium. You see three figures step forward with a solemn pace. They do not act with theatrical drama, but with a contained dignity, aware that they represent something much larger than themselves. As you watch them, your mind, stilled by the calm of the night, reflects on who these magi really were for the people of the Middle Ages. You remember that, in those ancient times, they were not seen simply as distant monarchs, but as wise astrologers,
men of science and spirit who knew how to read the secrets written in the celestial vault.
You look at the first of them, a young neighbor whose face barely shows the marks of time, and then at the second, a man in the prime of his strength, and finally at the third, an old man with a white beard and a slow gait. You understand, with a serene clarity, that this trinity is not accidental. For the medieval mindset, these three travelers represented the totality of the human experience. They were the three ages of man: impetuous youth, consolidated maturity, and the wisdom of old age. At the same time, their garments suggest distant and mysterious lands. You realize that they also symbolize the universality of the world known at that time: Europe, Asia, and Africa. Seeing them there, standing in the atrium, you feel that you are seeing all of humanity in all its stages and origins, united in a single purpose of search and adoration. The scene moves forward slowly. Another figure appears, wrapped in dark garments, representing King Herod. The dialogue is brief, spoken in a low and grave voice. There are no shouts, only a subtle tension. The contrast between earthly power, jealous and fearful, and the celestial wisdom of the Magi. You hear the ancient words, the questions about the child and the star, and you feel how the story comes to life in the gloom. This mention of the star makes you think of the beliefs that floated in the air of medieval nights like this one. For those ancestors, the star was not just a celestial body, but a real divine sign, a beacon lit by the hand of God to guide the lost. The night of Epiphany, this same night that you are now living, was considered a moment of presages and wonders. You remember the legends told by the fire, stories that said that in the deep silence of midnight, the animals in the stables briefly gained the gift of speech, conversing with human voices to praise the mystery of Christmas. It is an idea that brings an inner smile to your face, imagining the oxen and mules of the nearby farms breaking their silence in this sacred moment. The representation continues. The Magi offer their chests. You know that inside, in the imagination of the play, there is gold, incense, and myrrh. But your mind goes beyond material value. You think about how, for the people of the Middle Ages, these gifts had immense spiritual weight and protective properties. Gold for the king, incense for divinity, and myrrh for mortal humanity. They were offerings that spanned all of existence, from the throne to the tomb. A neighbor dressed in white, with a simplicity that suggests purity rather than splendor, approaches the Magi who are now resting. It is the angel. The warning is whispered, a dreamlike piece of advice not to return to Herod, to return to their lands by another way. It is a moment of change, of divine protection against dark intentions. This notion of protection resonates within you. You think of the rituals that accompany these dates, designed to safeguard the home and the soul. You visualize the holy water collected on this special night, to which extraordinary healing and protective properties were attributed. You think of the blessed chalk, the same one with which you have perhaps marked your own door, tracing the initials of the kings and the current year, creating an invisible barrier against misfortune and evil spirits. The atmosphere in the atrium is dense, charged with an ancient magic. You can almost taste the culinary traditions that accompany this vigil. Epiphany bread comes to mind, baked with care, and the sweet cakes where a bean or a coin is hidden. You remember how finding that little surprise turned the lucky one into the king for a day, reversing the social order in a game of innocence and joy. You imagine the taste of those breads, dense and fragrant, accompanied by more spiced wine, hot and sweet, perfect for fighting the January cold. The actors begin to withdraw, simulating their return journey by a different path, just as the angel instructed them. They move slowly, disappearing into the shadows at the back of the atrium, symbolizing the eternal pilgrimage of faith. As they fade from view, you remember the tales told by stone fireplaces centuries ago. Stories of the Magi not as static figures of a nativity scene, but as eternal wanderers. It was said that on this night their spirits still traveled the roads of the world, visiting humble houses, blessing those who kept their doors open and their hearts ready. There was talk of stars descending from the sky to rest upon the roofs of the righteous, and of an ancestral protection that kept the shadows of winter away. The representation has ended. Silence fills the atrium once more, but now it feels different. It is inhabited by the invisible presence of history, by the memory of generations who, just like you now, sought meaning in the stars and comfort in tradition. You stay for a moment longer, watching the last candle flicker, feeling a deep and heavy peace settling on your shoulders. You feel part of that long chain of humanity, protected by the same rituals, guided by the same dim but constant light. It is time to return to the warmth, carrying with you the certainty that on this night of portents you are not alone. The wise men, the kings, the travelers of antiquity walk with you in the silence.
Chapter 11. You look at a wrought iron lamp in the shape of a star hanging in the sanctuary, thinking about the spiritual light that guides pilgrims through ignorance and the darkness of the night. Your steps lead you now with a deliberate slowness toward the interior of the sanctuary, leaving behind the soft echo of the representation in the atrium to immerse yourself in a silence much more dense and sacred. The air in here is cool, permeated with centuries of incense and cold stone, and your eyes instinctively rise, seeking the source of a dim light flickering in the gloom. There, suspended from the high vault by a chain darkened by time, hangs a wrought iron lamp. You observe it closely, noting how the metal has been worked with patience and strength until it took the shape of a multi-pointed star. A heavy and solid structure that encloses in its heart a small and constant flame. You stand still, simply looking at that light, allowing its hypnotic glow to calm any trace of restlessness that might remain in your spirit. You think of the star it represents, that spiritual light which, according to ancient teachings, guides pilgrims through the vast ignorance of the world and the literal darkness of the winter night. As you breathe the still air of the sanctuary, your mind rests gently upon the figures of the Magi, those whom the Middle Ages did not see simply as distant monarchs, but as wise astrologers, masters of reading the heavens and guardians of ancient secrets. You remember that, for medieval thought, these three travelers were much more than characters in a story. They were the embodiment of the totality of the known world and of human experience. You visualize their faces in the twilight of your imagination. You see one who is young, full of vigor and hope, representing the morning of life. You see another in the fullness of maturity, strong and determined, and you see the third, an old man with a white beard, bearer of the wisdom that only the weight of years and the proximity of the end can grant. They are the three ages of man, youth, maturity, and old age, walking together under the same star, united in a common purpose that transcends the individual time of each one. You also reflect on how they embodied the three known continents on those ancient maps with imprecise borders: Europe, Asia, and Africa, suggesting that all the earth, in its immense variety, bowed before the mystery of the Epiphany. The iron lamp above you sways almost imperceptibly, and the shadows on the stone walls move with it, as if they were the cloaks of those eternal travelers brushing against the sanctuary walls. You think of their gifts not as simple material treasures, but as objects charged with a profound spiritual and protective meaning. The gold, frankincense, and myrrh were not just offerings, but talismans against evil, symbols that recognized royalty, divinity, and mortality, intertwining human destiny with the divine in an indissoluble knot. Your mind, lulled by the stillness of the place, drifts toward the beliefs that populated the nights of your ancestors during these dates. You remember the certainty with which it was believed that the star was no ordinary celestial body, but a divine sign, a royal omen written with fire upon the black velvet of the firmament, a guide for those who knew how to look upward with humility. The Epiphany, you tell yourself, is a night of omens, a moment when the veil between the visible and the invisible becomes as thin as frost upon the grass. The legend of the animals that speak at midnight comes to mind. You imagine the silent stables, where the ox and the mule, silent witnesses to the miracle, receive for a brief instant the gift of speech to praise the mystery, although you know that no human should attempt to listen to their conversations, for the mystery must remain veiled to be sacred. You feel a deep reverence for that nature which, in the medieval imagination, participated actively in the liturgy of the universe. You also think of the holy water collected and consecrated on this specific date, to which exceptional protective properties were attributed, capable of cleansing not only the body, but the soul and the home of any malignant influence. And you visualize the blessed chalk. You can almost feel the powdery texture of the white chalk between your fingers, and you see the steady hand of the father of the family marking the lintel of the sturdy wooden door with the sacred inscription, the numbers of the new year flanking the initials C, M, and B. Christus mansionem benedicat. May Christ bless this dwelling. Or perhaps Casper, Melchior, and Balthazar, invoked as guardians of the thresholds, protecting the entrance of the house against the freezing winds and the spirits that wander in the darkness. This image conveys a sense of absolute security, the idea of a home sealed and protected by faith and tradition, a warm refuge in the middle of winter. The thought of the house leads you to the aromas, and although you are in the sanctuary, your olfactory memory evokes the sweet and spicy smell of Epiphany foods. You imagine the special bread, golden and tender, baked with care and devotion. You visualize the round cakes like edible suns, inside which a dried bean or a silver coin is hidden, a small secret that will designate the king of the feast, an innocent game that connects the family table with the heavenly courts. You feel the imaginary warmth of a cup of spiced wine between your hands.
The aromatic steam rising toward your face, smelling of cinnamon, cloves, and honey, comforting the body after the gentle fasts and prayers that prepared the spirit for this night.
It comforts you to think of the legend that the kings still visit humble houses, not to leave gold, but to leave invisible blessings, touching the foreheads of sleeping children and ensuring that bread is not lacking on the table during the coming year. They were and are a protection against evil spirits, a force of ancient goodness that patrols the paths of the world while humanity sleeps. The light of the lamp flickers once more, softly, like an eyelid closing with sleep. You feel enveloped in that protection, part of that endless story. There is no rush in your thoughts, only a slow succession of images and sensations that anchor you to the earth and, at the same time, lift you toward the mystery. The ignorance and darkness of the night, which at first seemed vast and fearsome, feel tamed by the light of that small iron star, and by the memory of the wise men who knew how to interpret it. You are there, standing in the sanctuary, but you are also sitting by the fire of an ancient house, and you are walking under the desert sky, and you are protected, deeply protected, by the chalk on the door and the faith in your heart. The silence of the sanctuary is now your own silence. And in that stillness, you understand that light does not need to be dazzling to guide. It is enough for it to be constant, like the flame that burns inside the lamp, vigilant and serene. Chapter 12. You learn about ancient superstitions and the small scrolls with prayers to Casper, Melchior, and Balthazar that people carry with them to protect themselves from fever and unforeseen storms. You continue in this sacred space where time seems to have stopped to allow you to examine every detail of the story with a magnifying glass of calm and serenity. Your breathing is slow, rhythmic with the soft flickering of the lamp that illuminates the ancient texts before you. As you turn the pages of the old imaginary volumes that your mind projects, you delve deeper into the true identity of those travelers. You realize that for the medieval mindset, these men were not simply monarchs from distant lands, but something much deeper and more mysterious. They were wise astrologers, guardians of celestial secrets, who knew how to read the silent language of God in the immensity of the firmament. You observe in your mind the illustrations illuminated with gold leaf and lapis lazuli, and you notice how each of them embodies a facet of humanity. You see that they represent the 3 ages of man, a complete cycle of life that presents itself before the mystery. One is youth, impetuous and full of hope, with smooth skin and a gaze fixed on the horizon. Another is maturity, consolidated strength, the capacity to act and to build, bearded and robust. The third is old age, the wisdom accumulated after years of observing the stars, with a white beard and shoulders slightly curved by the weight of knowledge. You also understand that, in this ancient vision, they embody the entirety of the known world, Europe, Asia, and Africa, united in a single purpose, walking under the same light. This universality makes you feel connected to everything and everyone, part of a tradition that spans continents and centuries. Your attention now drifts toward a small, almost intimate detail that you find in the margins of these stories. You discover the existence of small objects of power and faith, the protection scrolls. You visualize these small pieces of paper or skin, worn by touch, meticulously folded into tiny squares. You learn that common people, peasants and travelers, carried these small writings with them as invisible shields against misfortune. In them, with iron gall ink that has turned brown over the centuries, the sacred names are written Caspar, Melchior, Balthazar. They are not just names, they are keys. You discover that there was a firm belief that carrying these names close to the heart, perhaps sewn into the hem of a tunic or inside a small leather locket, offered a specific protection. It was believed that these names had the power to calm fever, that shaking sickness that consumed bodies on cold winter nights. You feel a comforting relief as you imagine the coolness of that protection, like a damp cloth on a fevered forehead, lowering the temperature, restoring health. But their power went beyond the health of the body. You read that these small scrolls were supreme amulets against unforeseen storms. You imagine a solitary traveler on a medieval road, when the sky suddenly darkens and thunder makes the earth tremble. The traveler does not run. He simply touches the small bundle of paper on his chest, recites the names of the Magi, and feels the fear dissipate. He knows that just as the star guided the kings through deserts and dangers, those names will guide him through the tempest to a safe haven. That sense of security transfers to you right now. You feel protected against any emotional or physical storm, sheltered by the memory of these ancient rituals. Your mind now travels toward the very night of Epiphany, a night charged with omens and white magic. It is a night where the boundary between the divine and the earthly becomes as thin as the paper of the scrolls. You remember the legends that speak of the animals in the stables. It is said that exactly at midnight, in the absolute silence of winter, the oxen and mules briefly acquire the gift of speech to praise the miracle. However, you also learn that it is a mystery that must be respected and not disturbed. Humans must remain in their houses, in the warmth of the home, letting nature have its sacred moment of communion. You now visualize the ritual of water and chalk. You see a vessel of water blessed on that special night, a liquid that is considered medicine and shield. People sprinkle it in the corners of the rooms, in the stables, in the fields, creating a perimeter of sanctity that nothing evil can cross. And then, the chalk. You observe a steady hand writing upon the dark wood lintel of an entrance door. They write the numbers of the new year and the initials of the kings, C, M, B. Christus mentionem benedicat. May Christ bless this house. Seeing those letters traced in white chalk upon the wood, you feel that your own space, the place where you are now, is sealed and protected. Nothing dark can enter, only light, peace, and goodwill have permission to cross that threshold. The atmosphere of your meditation becomes warmer, more domestic, and you begin to perceive imaginary but vivid aromas. It is the smell of freshly baked bread, the Epiphany bread. You imagine breaking a golden and crusty loaf, searching for the bean hidden inside. It is not a game of chance, but a rite of destiny. Whoever finds the bean becomes the king for a day. A reminder that royalty and divinity can hide in the humblest of things. You feel the aroma of spiced wine warming over the embers. You can smell the cinnamon, the cloves, the orange peel, and the honey, an intoxicating blend that warms the body from within and keeps the deep winter cold at bay. It is a moment of gentle fasting, not of painful deprivation, but of a lightness that allows the spirit to rise, accompanied by rhythmic prayers that sound like lullabies. Finally, you visualize yourself sitting by a large stone fireplace. The fire crackles softly, consuming oak logs that burn slowly, emitting a constant and soporific heat. You are surrounded by family or a silent community, listening to the tales being told in low voices. You hear stories about the kings as eternal wanderers.
They tell you that they never truly died, but instead continue traveling the roads of the world, invisible and silent. They say that sometimes, on January nights, if you pay close attention, you can hear the distant jingling of their camels' bridles or see a majestic shadow cross the snowy field. You hear stories of stars that move, lights that descend from the sky to rest upon the roofs of houses where goodness reigns. They tell you that the kings still visit humble homes, not to leave gold, but to leave blessings of peace and contentment. These stories do not seek to frighten, but quite the opposite. They seek to weave a blanket of words that covers the listeners and protects them against the evil spirits of the outer darkness. Everything in this setting is designed to make you feel safe.
You have the names on the scroll against fever. You have the chalk on the door against evil. You have the fire and the wine against the cold. You have the stories to occupy the mind and keep fear away. You feel wrapped in layers and layers of protective traditions, as if you were wearing a heavy, warm wool cloak that insulates you from any worry. The figure of the Magi has been transformed before your eyes. They are no longer just figures from a porcelain nativity scene, but powerful ancestral guardians, physicians of the soul, and architects of security. With this absolute certainty of being protected by the heavens and by history, your breathing becomes even deeper. The weight of your eyelids is pleasant, an invitation to rest in the certainty that everything is in order.
The ancient sages watch over your sleep. The scrolls guard your health, and the star shines, fixed and eternal, above the roof of your refuge. You are safe. You are at peace.
Chapter 13. You. Observe how the villagers gather the dry branches of holly and ivy to be burned, ceremonially marking the end of the 12 days of Christmas and the return to ordinary time. The morning light enters through the small window of your room, but today it has a different quality. It is a clear light, clean, already devoid of the urgency of celebration, but full of a deep and settled peace. You wake up slowly, feeling the warmth of the heavy wool blankets over your body, and you know, with that quiet intuition that comes from living in harmony with the seasons, that the sacred cycle has reached its culmination. You get up without haste, placing your feet on the cool wood of the floor. As you fasten your tunic, you understand that for the world around you, For the medieval mindset you breathe, these men were not simply distant monarchs adorned with jewels. They were, above all, wise astrologers, readers of the great celestial book that unfolds every night over the heads of mortals. You walk toward the sturdy wooden table where the remains of the ceremonial breakfast still rest. You observe the special Epiphany bread, a golden and round loaf, baked with the care of one preparing an offering. You know that within its dense and fragrant crumb a dried bean was hidden, a small secret of the earth that designated the king of the feast, inverting the social order for a few hours, remembering that before the divine, all earthly statuses are ephemeral. Beside the bread, a clay pitcher still contains a little spiced wine. The aroma reaches you, cloves, cinnamon, warm honey, and red wine. It is a comforting scent, one that warms the chest and dissipates the last chills of the night. You take a small sip and feel how the ancient flavor connects you with past generations, with all those who have celebrated this same closing rite. You step out of the house, and the cold winter air greets you, but it is not hostile. As you close the door behind you, your fingers brush the wood of the lintel. There, recently traced with blessed chalk, you see the letters C.M.B., flanked by the current year. Christus mansionem benedicat. May Christ bless this dwelling. Or, perhaps, the names of the guardians, Casper, Melchior, Balthazar. You stop for a moment to contemplate the inscription. You think about what those three names represent. They are not just individuals, they are the totality of the human experience. You remember the teachings that say they represented the three ages of Nan, the impetuousness and hope of youth, the strength and consolidation of maturity, and the wisdom and fragility of old age. And beyond that, they represented the universality of the known world, Europe, Asia, and Africa, coming from the ends of the earth to converge at a point of light. You walk along the packed earth path toward the center of the village. The atmosphere is one of quiet activity. There is no bustle of Christmas preparations, but rather the methodical calm of order and cleanliness. You observe the villagers leaving their houses. They carry neither gifts nor food, but branches. They are the branches of holly and ivy that, for 12 days, have transformed the interiors of the dwellings into small sacred forests. You watch as an old man carefully takes down a garland of ivy from his doorpost. The leaves, which 2 weeks ago shone with a waxy and vital green, now appear slightly dry, curled at the edges, having given all their energy to protect the home. You approach the place where they gather. It is an open space, far from the thatched roofs, where the earth is black and safe. There is a belief, an unwritten but strictly obeyed rule. It is bad luck to keep the green decorations beyond this day. They have fulfilled their purpose. They have sheltered the benign spirits of nature during the deepest darkness of the solstice. And now they must be returned to the earth through fire so that spring can begin to take shape without ties to the past. You watch as a pile is formed with the branches. The dark green of the holly, with its red berries now shriveled like small drops of dried blood, mixes with the long vines of the ivy. Someone brings a torch. There are no loud shouts nor strident music. The fire is applied to the base of the vegetable mound. The crackling begins softly. The dry leaves catch easily, and a column of white and aromatic smoke begins to rise toward the grayish sky. You stand there, feeling the heat on your face, watching how the flames consume the old to make room for the new. It is the ceremonial end of the 12 days. While the fire burns, you hear the low conversations of those around you. They talk about the previous night, the night of Epiphany, the night of omens. A woman comments in whispers how the water from the wells, blessed at midnight, now has the purity necessary to heal ailments throughout the year. Another villager, with his gaze lost in the flames, remembers the legend that animals speak with a human voice at the exact instant of the divine birth, a mystery that no man should attempt to hear under penalty of misfortune, but which fills the stable with a palpable holiness. The smoke smells of burnt forest and resin. It is a purifying scent. You feel that with each branch that turns to ash, the extraordinary time, the time of miracles and the suspension of reality, is retreating. The magic does not disappear. It simply retreats into the interior of the earth and into the depths of the heart,
leaving the surface free for the return of ordinary time. You think of the 3 gifts of the Magi as you watch the embers: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They were not simple riches, they were spiritual protections. Gold for the royalty of the soul, frankincense for the divinity of the spirit, and myrrh, with its healing bitterness, for the mortality of the body. You understand that these gifts remain with you, invisible but heavy, like a mantle over your shoulders. The fire begins to die down, turning into a bed of glowing embers that pulse with the gentle wind. People begin to disperse, returning to their daily labors. The blacksmith returns to his forge, the baker to her oven, the farmer to his tools. The world turns again at its usual pace, marked by the sun and work,
and not by the star and the miracle. However, as you walk back to your home, you feel a fundamental difference. It is not the same ordinary time you left behind before Christmas. It is a renewed time, washed, blessed. Passing by a low window, you hear a mother telling a story to her children by the hearth fire. She tells them about the 3 wise men, but not as characters from a closed book. She tells them that they are eternal wanderers. She tells them that, although Christmas has ended, they continue traveling the roads of the world, tireless figures under the stars, protecting lonely travelers and driving away the evil spirits that lurk at the crossroads. You stop to listen for a moment. The voice is monotonous, comforting, almost a chant. They keep walking, says the voice, and as long as there is a star in the sky, we will never truly be alone in the darkness. You resume your path. The sky begins to darken early, as befits winter, but you feel no fear. The chalk mark on your door glows faintly under the light of the rising moon. You enter your house, which now feels empty of green decorations, but full of an essential cleanliness. You sit in your usual chair. The silence is absolute, but it is not empty. It is the silence of security. You watch the last ember in your own fireplace. The 12 days have passed. The branches have been burned. The cycle has closed perfectly, and you, protected by history, by the stars, and by the ancient faith of your ancestors, close your eyes and surrender to the absolute calm of ordinary time. Knowing that magic now sleeps under the snow, patiently awaiting its next awakening. Chapter 14. You return to the interior of your home, leaving behind the distant echo of the chants and the smoke from the holly branches that have already been almost completely consumed in the communal bonfire. The winter night air is cold,
clear and sharp. But as you cross the threshold of your door, the residual heat from the fireplace envelops you like an ancient and familiar embrace. The room is in semi-darkness, illuminated only by the orange glow of the embers dying slowly in the hearth, and by the steady flame of a single tallow candle on the table. Everything is in silence. It is a dense,
the absolute calm that follows the culmination of a great cycle. You approach the sturdy wooden table where the last vestiges of the celebration still rest. You pass your hand gently over the crumbs of the special Epiphany bread, feeling its texture under your fingers. Beside it, a ceramic pitcher contains the rest of the spiced wine. You pour yourself one last sip, small and reverent. The liquid is dark and aromatic. As you taste it, you notice the cloves, the cinnamon, and the honey, flavors that warm your throat and evoke on your palate the exotic gifts from distant lands. There is no haste in your movements. Each gesture is slow, deliberate, an extension of the domestic liturgy you have lived throughout the day. You sit in your usual chair, in front of the low fire, and allow your mind to wander gently toward the figures that have presided over this day. In the mindset of your time, in this medieval world you inhabit, the three wise men are not simple characters from a children's story. They are pillars of existence, architects of destiny, wise astrologers who knew the secret language of the celestial spheres. You watch the shadows dance on the stone walls and reflect on who they really were. They were the representation of the totality of the known world, Europe, Asia, and Africa, united in a single purpose. They were also the mirror of your own life and the lives of all men, the impetuousness of youth, the strength of maturity, and the resigned wisdom of old age. Thinking of them, you do not feel distance, but a protective closeness.
Their three gifts, gold for the king, frankincense for the god, and myrrh for the mortal man, are not just offerings, but symbols of a spiritual protection that now, on this sacred night, extends over your house. Your eyes drift toward the entrance door, solid and barred against the darkness outside. There, on the dark wood lintel, barely visible in the gloom, rests the inscription you traced this morning with the blessed chalk. 20 plus C plus M plus B plus 24. Christus mansionis benedicat. May Christ bless this house. But also Casper, Melchior, Balthazar. You know that mark is more than white dust. It is a seal, an invisible shield against evil spirits, against storms, and against any misfortune that might lurk in the shadows. The blessed chalk has closed the circle of protection, and you feel deeply safe. You remember the stories told by the fire in your childhood, legends that say the three wise men are eternal wanderers. It is believed that, although their bodies rest in the great cathedral of Cologne, their spirits continue to travel, following a star that never goes out, visiting humble homes to ensure that faith and hope remain alive. You wonder, with a sleepy and quiet curiosity, if on this night of omens, at the stroke of midnight, the animals in your small stable will acquire the gift of speech, as the elders claim. Perhaps the ox and the donkey murmur prayers in an ancient and forgotten Latin. You do not need to go and check. The mystery is
You remember the stories told by the fire in your childhood, legends that say the 3 wise men are eternal wanderers. It is believed that, although their bodies rest in the great cathedral of Cologne, their spirits continue to travel, following a star that never goes out, visiting humble homes to ensure that faith and hope remain alive. You wonder, with a sleepy and quiet curiosity, if on this night of omens, at the stroke of midnight, the animals in your small stable will acquire the gift of speech, as the elders claim. Perhaps the ox and the donkey murmur prayers in an ancient and forgotten Latin. You do not need to go and check. The mystery is more beautiful when it remains intact in the imagination. The candle begins to flicker, indicating that its life is coming to an end. It is time to rest. You stand up slowly, feeling the pleasant weight of the fatigue in your limbs. It is a good tiredness, the result of a day lived with fullness and purpose. You blow out the candle with a soft breath, and the room is plunged into darkness, except for the faint reddish glow of the embers that will guide you to your bed. You walk toward your bedroom. The air here is cooler, smelling of dried lavender and old wood. You undress calmly, leaving your holiday clothes folded on a chest. The fabric of your nightshirt is cool against your skin, but you know warmth awaits you. You approach the bed, a high refuge with a mattress of straw and feathers that promises the forgetting of all effort. You slide under the heavy wool blankets. You feel their comforting weight pressing gently on your body, anchoring you to the earth, protecting you from the January cold. You settle in, finding the perfect position, and the coarse but warm wool wraps you up to your chin. The outside world, with its icy wind and distant stars, now seems very far away. Here, under the covers, there is a microclimate of peace and security. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. The air entering your lungs is clean and silent. In the darkness behind your eyelids, you visualize the 3 guardians one last time. You do not need to see them to know they are there. In the mindset of your era, the watch of the 3 wise kings is a tangible reality. You feel them take their places, invisible and majestic, around your bed. One at the head, watching over your thoughts, another at the foot, guiding your dreams, and a third at your side. Protecting your heart. There is no longer any need to worry about tomorrow. The extraordinary time has ended, and ordinary time will begin at dawn, but you have been renewed. The magic has not gone, it has retreated inward, toward the center of your being, where it will burn like a small flame for the rest of the year. You feel your muscles relax completely, one by one, releasing any remaining tension. Your breathing becomes slow, rhythmic, in time with the silence of the house. The protection is absolute. The star that guided the Magi now watches over your sleep. You surrender to rest with blind and absolute confidence, knowing that nothing evil can touch you under the guard of the kings. All is well. The night is quiet. Sleep arrives, deep and restorative. You sleep.